Dimp Digital Presents Idle Game Chat.
Hello, Apps here from Dimp Digital. Welcome to Idle Game Chat. This is the weekly video games podcast where we give our impressions of the games that you can play today and react to the latest news from the wonderful world of video games. We're here every Monday on your favourite podcast app and YouTube, absolutely free. This week, I'm joined by the 2018 Fantasy Gaming League Grand Prix winner, the 2019 Fantasy Gaming League champion. It's that man, Paper. How's it going?
It's good, and soon to be the 2021 Grand Prix winner. That's just putting it out there earlier on, so that can be clipped and shared around.
Are you confident? Because it's a bit of a funny year. There's the release is being pushed back. We've seen things like Biff's been praying for Prince of Persia. That's now 2022. What's going on? Because you've front loaded your games again.
I guess I've front loaded it. Everything that's dropping is dropping reasonable, which is good. I wouldn't say anything's dropping really good. So if some other people manage to put in some good teams, I think they'll be able to take it. I think where I might get away with beating some people is that they're transferring crap in at the end, or that they miss a transfer, or something along those lines. There are a few people out there that have got good games, and I'm a little bit on the edge of my seat, but I'm doing okay at the moment. I can take that arrogance like I sort of did last year with Biff, and then see that all played out well, didn't it?
Well, it did. Who do you think's the biggest threat then?
You always put Hall up there, and he's doing well. He's only got one or two games at the moment, but they both scored well, so that's all right. The other one who I think's a bit of a dark horse this year that people don't really talk about is Krog. He's had a couple of good games in there. He's had a pants one in it, but he's not been consistently average, but he's had a couple of good games and a pants game, and so that's sort of averaging out just above good at the moment, I'd say. So depending on how the rest of his games come out, he might do all right, but. Yeah, it depends on how he gets on towards the end of the year. That's where the money will be made. That's where trophies will be given out, and that's where belts will be reclaimed.
Well, Krog's been unlucky twice actually. I think the year you won the Grand Prix, he was like 6 points off you or something. It was really, really close, and then he got stung out by the Logan rule with Football Manager Touch. So now we've had to put in that rule where the season ends on a finite date. Logan heroically really said, look, let's pack this in. All right, the game's not coming out, I'm happy just to leave it. So he closed the season off, and then a week later Football Manager Touch came in, got a score, he would have won the title then. So he's been close twice. Last year was a bit of a blowout for him, but generally he's up there, he's a contender.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride, eh? That's what we've been experiencing with Krog over the years. Still yet to hold a bit of glory in his hands. He is the Arsenal of the.
Well, he's not. He's the Spurs, isn't he? Because they're just as shit. They don't win nothing. They don't. They don't win anything. Anyway, before we upset all the 6 Spurs fans that are out there now. Interesting show today. Got one game's called Deep Dive In, and a bit of a chat around the PC gaming space, where someone may have, or may not have, we don't know, defected over to in the last year or so. Before we get into the meat of the show, you can support us 2 ways. Twitch Prime is one way of doing that, so link your Amazon to your Twitch account. Go to twitch.tv/Dimp Digital and you could subscribe for free. They'll give us £2.50, $2.50 actually, it's not £2.50, otherwise we'll be rolling in it. Or you can just join one of our tiers on there for a few quid a month and get some cool emotes. And there's patreon.com/Dimp Digital, which has been updated. No silly tiers on there, so no rewards as such. It's kind of like if you want to chuck $1, £1, 50p, you can do. So it's open to any level. We will take the money and run with it for sure. But Mr. Paper, there's a game that's come out earlier this year, indie game, early access, and it really has, and probably still is in certain circles, taking the gaming world by a bit of storm. It literally popped out of nowhere. It's Valheim. Now, first of all, before we started talking about Valheim, because you were, at some point during your Dimp Digital career, you were heralded as sort of the indie man. You know, all the indies that were coming out, all the survival games that were coming out, you were championing them, giving them the profile, giving them the spotlight. You seem to have dropped off that in recent years. But before Valheim was a thing, were you early on the hype train?
In terms of before it came out, no.
Wow.
I think I was a bit like everyone else in terms of in the Dimp crew, should I say, in terms of missing that boat.
What the fuck is this, Will said?
Yeah, exactly. However, I think I was maybe one of the first, or if not the first, in the group to say, "Hey, look, does anyone fancy doing this?" And I think that was largely because of some of the YouTubers I watch. Just a couple of videos started popping on, and oh, that looks interesting. And yeah, I when I see something that looks interesting, I'll always pop it up in the chat or in the Discord.
Yep.
Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't.
Mostly things get shot down in these Discords and chats.
Pretty much everything gets shot down. You know, it's a tough world being in the Dimp Digital.
It's a culture of hate, is what I call it.
It's a pure salt machine.
Yeah.
So unless you can deal with that salt, it isn't for you. But it's lots of things get shut down, and this. I think it was an interesting one. It didn't get shot down straight away. Actually,
Nope.
That was the interesting thing. People did say, "Let's give it a chance," or "Let's give it a shot," and jumped into tried to jump into a world. We obviously that was that was a story in its own right, and we probably go into that a bit more detail how we came about it. But it was I definitely think, you know, it's one of those games you've seen it a lot this year or over the pandemic, should I say, where these games have come out and there's been that hype around it online that, you know, suddenly everyone jumps into it or has a go. You had it with Fall Guys, you had it with what's it called?
Animal Crossing.
Animal Crossing, that's the word I'm looking for. Among Us and though more social games they are and stuff like that, but these games that were sort of really kick off, and I'd say Valheim was sort of there that, you know, people weren't really expecting it. It came out, it was better than what people expected, and that sort of drove a lot of hype. And I actually attribute that a lot to shit games, really, just in what's coming out. And not all games are shit. That's probably the wrong way to say it. But people so used to the same stuff being churned out, just being reskinned and repackaged. That's how I feel anyway. It's like they're not enticing me to come and play these games. I don't want to play the new Assassin's Creed because it's got a couple of new little mechanics. I don't want to play the new COD and all that stuff. And I'm pissing off a load of people here by saying it, but there's a load of shit stuff out there that I just doesn't say, hey, try me, this is new, this is different, you know, you'll like this. And I think that was what Valheim did for a lot of people. It just sort of said, hey, this is a really different type of game than we're used to, or not really different, but a different spin, and it's in a good state, you know, give it a go. And I was the indie king back in the day, quite happily giving some of these indie bollocks the time of day when maybe it shouldn't have been, and I may have learnt my lesson from that. But this one, yeah, came out of the blue, and I was like, yeah, we'll try that, we'll jump on that train.
You fucking hipster, that's all I'm hearing. Don't like any of the commercial, all the mainstream games. You want to dig out and find all the hipster shit. Same with your beer, although Hobgoblin's a bit mainstream. I see you drinking that. And I've got Brewdog, which ain't much better. But
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's all hipster. I'm just looking for something a bit different. I don't know. I mean, I'm not so I can if I want a game for a story, I'll just watch a film now. That's the way I sort of look at it. And unless the story's really compelling and it really says play me for the story, and I'm not too bothered. And then I just think like everything else has everything else type mechanics now, and so it's just like, you know, I don't know what to play that's different, what's new. Maybe I'm missing a trick, but you know, the popular games are all the ones that are being franchised and respun out, and it just I enjoyed some of them back in the day, but and maybe I need to jump back and have a go. But you know, I've sort of stood on the time. Equally, I think there's a and I'm rabbiting here. There's a
People
lot
who've
of
listened
games.
before know this happens, so they've expected it. They've either deleted the episode knowing that you're on because it'll be paper talking for an hour, or they've turned the volume up, so you have that kind of appeal.
Definitely, yeah. The volume's off, so I can talk about what I want now, aren't it? So it's just, yeah. It's I don't have a lot of time to invest in games as much as maybe I used to, and so I guess that I have to be selective now, and so that's why we're playing Fall Guys at the moment.
Well, I mean that's yeah, that has been picked up and played, and there'll be it's good fun that now they've added the squads mode. Really, that's kind of giving that game a new lease of life because before that, playing it on your own was good fun. Like I played it quite a lot in the opening week, and then just fell off a cliff of it because I was like, this is not. It's not really holding me. And when you played it in a group, you were playing separately in the same lobby, but you just like I would fall off and then watch someone go through 2 rounds. It's not the same. Like when you got a squad running like we have, and there's this 4-man's, like it's good to be working together as a team, and so that you either all go out or you all go through, and it makes for some good streams if I do say so myself. Valheim came out sort of February time. Was an early access title, which I historically have stayed away from because when something comes out in early access, it's like you may as well just guess when it comes out 1.0. But I felt like Valheim came out with enough to warrant the investment, and the investment was quite low. I think it was like 15 quid, wasn't it, when it came out? So cheap as chips, really, when you get some of the comparisons. And then many months later, I look at the Steam times. I've put in 38.6 hours. You've put in a whopping 60.8 hours. So how's that happened? I mean, you mentioned that you're looking for something new. On the surface, people might just say Minecraft rip-off with really simple mechanics and like awkward base building. Survival mechanics.
Yeah, and
I've got to watch every time I go for a shit. That's what people are thinking who ain't played it.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Like I think ultimately when you break any game down, there's not a lot there that's new, and a lot of things are taken and reshaped and rejigged around. I think it's sort of maybe looking for what you wanted. I think I've been quite into wanting to play a game a bit like Minecraft again recently, and I don't feel like there's been much appeal in our group to do something like that. I think I've thrown out a few times that does anyone want me to set up a server?
There's too much poison. Poison's been eradicated.
Exactly. There's too much griefing going on, but it's I didn't feel like there was that. But this came along, and I think it gave you that interesting bit of you can pretty much go off and do what you want, but there's also a linear story there that you can just sort of play through as well. And so like there's some sort of soft level of guidance if you want to go through it.
That little crow sits there and goes, "Hello, do this.
Yeah.
You can do that."
Yeah, exactly. Though saying that, you probably couldn't go off and just do what you wanted because defeating bosses are sort of unlocks the next level and stuff like that. But you could spend all the time not leveling, just being at a certain level and just being quite happy with that. And there's nothing stopping you from doing that. And so I think the appeal from it sort of came from that side of things, that there's a bit more of that sandboxy mode. Is that I like the idea of a game that I could jump in, do a bit of time on it. I'm generally not a type of person that can sit on a game for several hours a day, maybe 3.
Yeah.
And I start to get, when I'm on my own, I start to get a bit annoyed, not annoyed, but like frustrated or tired with it, and I need to log off for a bit. And so it was the type that I could maybe log on for a couple of hours, do something on my own. But equally so, when other people came on, that progression wasn't lost or wasn't wasted, as long as we were in after the same sort of goals. It doesn't matter. And I think that sort of showed it in terms of me putting probably twice the amount of hours in as you did, because I was able to go off and do some stuff, but you were still able to progress at the same sort of level as me. And it's I enjoyed that. And we say us, there was a guy in our group called Phil at the end of it who put in 300 hours, and he progressed at the same level as us. He spent a lot of time building, and he did some amazing builds on the server. So much better than what we did, but it allowed for that. And so if you wanted to sink hundreds of hours, or if you wanted to sink 30 hours into it, you could progress together, as long as there was some sort of coordination around how you progressed, and someone didn't go off and just do a load of stuff on their own. It's in terms of the bosses, you had that, and I think that's what was appealing, and that's maybe what helped with its longevity in the group for us.
Yeah, I think one of the things that allowed me to play it for as long as I did was there was the social element. Secondly, was we got a dedicated server. So Dave, Destiny Dave, however you know him, the man in the shadows, the man behind the scenes, he paid for a server for a few months. So he rented one for us. So there was always a persistent server ready and open for us, and we could go on at any time, and things would progress whilst we was not there, and people just dip in and out. So that really helped. I think having a persistent world that we could log on and not be relying on someone else, because most of the time people have to have it locally, so we'd have to wait until, say, Paper was logged on, and we'd all jump into his game, and then we could only play it when he was on. Having a dedicated server definitely helped. But the other thing is, like when I mentioned at the beginning about you got to, time how many times you go for a shit each day, have a piss, all that stuff, like the survival elements or the survival mechanics. I think what they've done in Valheim is there's a flavour of that, but it's nowhere near as like micromanaged as you might think. So you don't actually have to eat food, and you just die. Like I played DayZ on the Xbox when it was on Game Pass. Okay, played it once, and I died from hunger, like the first time I played it. Couldn't find anything to eat. That doesn't happen in Valheim. Like there's an element of food eating there, and essentially you cook food, you eat food, and that increases your health and your recovery. But you won't just die from that. It's not as harsh or as punishing. And for me, that was a bit of a key point, because the one thing that I find gets in the way of a lot of survival games is that you're constantly monitoring like busybody things to be doing. Like, and I know there's a lot of like resource gathering in this, but I don't mind doing that. What I do resent is having to drink water and eat on certain occasions. Otherwise, your character just dies. Like removing that as a punishment, I thought was a good move. How did that sit with you? Because you've played a lot of games where you normally are punished for stuff like that, and that's kind of part and parcel. Like even if you think of like No Man's Sky, you run out of oxygen, like you'll die. There's a resource you have to keep topping up. You don't have that in Valheim. Does that make it a bit too easy, or is that actually a good balance in hindsight?
I think it was a good decision. I think with all these games, the game should give you the opportunity to maybe set that at a server level in terms of what you do and don't want enabled, or on a game level,
Yeah.
because different people enjoy games in different ways. You can affect it, and I think, as you said, like there are games out there that I just want to be relaxed in, chilled, and understand, and Valheim the majority of the time gave me that, and because I didn't have to worry so much about my food. Now the interesting point was when suddenly there was a goblin turning up, or whatever they're called, trolls and stuff like that. I suddenly forgot that I hadn't eaten. Then suddenly I realised, and then there's the old panic. I need to eat something. I need to get some food down me and stuff like that. But I think that was a good way to be punishing, in terms of something in the world's happened, you just haven't topped up your food bar and your stamina, and actually now you're at a disadvantage because you haven't thought about it, not because you're going around chopping up a load of wood that day and then you suddenly just drop down and die, because that's no fun. You just want to get on with some of the tasks in hand, and enjoy it, without having to worry about the micromanagement, and like you don't mind too much, therefore, when that does come in. So I think it was definitely a good move. I also think they did a really nice idea around when you die and your loot not despawning, or after a certain amount of time. Like even in Minecraft, it just despawns after a certain amount of time.
Is it?
If it isn't picked up and put into a chest and stuff like that, it's just gone. Whereas at least here, it creates that grave, and it's there stored until someone comes along and picks it up. It obviously adds an interesting element if someone gets there before you and they could steal your stuff if you want.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like that in any way is as punishing as you dying halfway across the map and then suddenly you're rushing to get back there and you lose all your stuff because you were out trying to venture and enjoy the exploration side of the game. And it adds a new element that if you die all the way there, you have to get back with like you might have left, or your gear might be there and you haven't got as much good gear to get back. And I think that adds another element which is interesting, but it's nowhere near as punishing as some of these other games. And I feel like that opens the door to a lot of other people.
Yeah.
To at least be a bit more social, and a bit more enjoyable, for people on all sorts of levels. And I think that definitely worked for us, on that aspect.
Yeah. Well, I remember a few years ago we tried to play. We didn't try. We did play Conan, with Logan, me, you, Logan, and a 3-person local. Something on PS4, wasn't it? So we was playing on that. That was fairly punishing. You die without cooking your meat. The meat. Another thing is the meat or the food would go rotten if you didn't eat it within time. Like, I'm just thinking back to that experience and how back then we were quite accepting of that. And although it was a pain, we was like, oh, eat the meat, it's going to go rotten, all that stuff. Like now to play something like Valheim where that's completely removed and it's not really an issue. I don't know if I could go back to something like Conan. Like, given how hard that is, and I know you spent a bit of time with Ark as well, which was also, another one that required a level of survival. I don't know. I just feel like this might be the way forward.
Yeah, I think it depends on the experience you want to get, really, and I think that's just different for everyone, and that's why I feel like these games should give you the option at that server level to be able to, select, what style, whether you want, to be sort of that, extremely punishing type of server, because there are people out there that want to do it, or whether you want something to be a bit more, relaxed and enjoyable because you want to spend more time building, or in Ark maybe training dinosaurs and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
give you the
Yeah, but you
ability,
couldn't
like,
do that because you're dropping dead every 5 minutes. You didn't top your meat up.
exactly, but there are people out there that like that and that are good at that, and they enjoy that side of the game, and I get that. It's just maybe not for us because of us scrubs not being so good at gaming. But it's definitely, I think it's a better entry level into some of these type of games, and more enjoyable when you want to play at more of that social level. And I feel like when we play in groups, especially in our group, we want to play a bit more at that social level, and then we do have sections where people go out and try to be not so much, but do things at a higher level, and you look to people like maybe like Dave and Hall and with the Destiny raid and all that type of stuff, where they will go out and do those things at a higher level because that's what they enjoy at that moment. But then they also, people quite happy to dumb it down a bit and be a bit more sociable, enjoy having a beer, because especially with the whole pandemic, I think it's really taught us is that communication and connecting via like this now is here to stay for forever, and actually allows people to connect that now, on other sides of the country, other sides of the world, and so forth. And you don't want to spend all that time getting frustrated with a game because you're consistently dying. You want to be able to enjoy the game while also being able to have a laugh and talk about and catch up and stuff like that. And so I think these games do definitely allow that, while also having that element of skill to it. Is because it's not like you can't just turn up, because the bosses do require a level of skill, and leveling up does or gearing up does require some level of skill. It's not just going out and mining everything, because certain things that you have to mine are in certain horrendous areas where it will require a level of skill to get that, and so you can enjoy that, but equally so it's definitely nowhere near as punishing. And it's also, I find it's a different type of a game when you play on your own. Like, as I said, I died once when I was just on my own exploring, and I didn't want to go and pick up my stuff on my own, so I just logged off and waited till everyone came back on, and just sort of got everyone to help me get all my stuff back. I'd imagine if I died when everyone was there, we would have all got the stuff back at the same point, and so I think it allows that sort of more of that social element in the game, which is, I think we enjoyed it, which is the main thing.
Yeah, no, I think everyone was enjoying it for the time that we played it. I also like the way the game leveled you up as like a character. So you didn't pick a class or anything. You're essentially a dead Viking that drops into this. I think it's the afterworld that they're going for. I can't remember what it's called in the actual Norse mythology, but you dropped in there, and the aim of the game is to defeat the world bosses that are lurking. I think maybe not as we record now or as people listen to this, but certainly when it first kicked off, there were 5 bosses to get through. We got through 3 before ultimately packing it in, and we'll get on to perhaps why that was. But with something like Minecraft, there's the Ender Dragon to work towards, and I think the Wither was added and all that sort of stuff, and probably more stuff's been added now. But I found that having just some sort of goal was helpful. It's like we want to build up enough resources, enough gear, food, healing items, weapons, so we can go and take on the boss. And that'll unlock sort of a new set of mining opportunities and resource gathering. And that was kind of the pattern. Like, you'd kill the boss, you'd usually get an item which would then allow you to craft a new object or a new tool, and then perhaps you could mine copper or something, or silver, or whatever it might be. How important is that to Valheim and to some of these other games? Because a lot of the other survival games kind of just pride themselves on there is no aim. You drop in, you do whatever you want, you make the rules, and people find that liberating. But with Valheim, there's obviously a very clear structure there that if you want to get better stuff, you have to sort of be taking on these bosses.
Yeah, no, I think it's for, and there's, each game has their own way about doing things, and it's not that I think there's a wrong or right way about it. I just think different things work for different people, and I think the Valheim way is good for us when we was playing it, because it gave us that goal, like the point of why we'd log on the next session. Like, we know we needed to get a bunch of copper and tin, for example, to make bronze, and so it was not liberating. It gave us direction around reason for logging on and doing stuff, because if I look back at the game, if we'd created the Dimp HQ and there was no bosses or things to go, and if it's just to say get better gear, because you can go into some of these other areas and defeat other higher level mobs, we probably would have sacked it off long before.
Yeah.
And I think what it does, it gives you something to aim towards and work towards, instead of it, and something that gives you reward, because it ultimately unlocks, as you said, the next set of areas. I think when we come on to the end, well, we quit, as you said later, but like ultimately, I think they might have to look at that. But it is definitely good in terms of giving you. I like games that are free and gives you the freedom to sort of do what you want, but ultimately gives you some sort of direction of travel. I find it hard, as you mentioned, in some of these games where there is no direction of travel. I like Ark, for example. I've played it a few times. As you mentioned, I started like leveling up, or started getting a few better equipment, but ultimately, apart from getting better dinosaurs at the time, and things obviously progressed a lot since then.
Yeah.
I just didn't see the point of me keep playing, because I was like, well, I've seen all the better gear because I've seen YouTube videos and stuff like that, and so apart from me actually figuring out, like playing it myself and doing it, I don't know what that's bringing to the table. And maybe it's because I was doing it on single player servers, and maybe it would have been better on multiplayer servers. But I have my frustrations with those type of games as well. I get annoyed where on those PvP games, that if someone kills me and takes all my loot, I'm like, oh well, that was the last 2 hours of my life wasted. And I get frustrated with stuff like that, and so that's why I think for the Valheim large of it, us being on that server that Dave had was nice, because we knew no one was going to steal our shit if they killed us.
Well, I've got a suspicion someone was killing my pigs for a while, because I kept coming back on and they were dead. So someone was slaughtering them.
It was apparently those waves. But we fed them. We managed to nurture them in the end, and you completed that goal.
I did. I did manage to be a pig breeder, or hog breeder.
It did manage to be a hog breeder. But yeah, definitely some sort of direction I found for us helpful, because it gave us that North Star to aim towards, and we could get there how we wanted, and that's what I liked about it. Is like, we know we need this copper, we know we need this iron or whatever it is, but how we and there's obviously to get it, but how we got it and how we went around getting it was up to us, really. We could pick and choose where we went off and south to get it and stuff like that. We could set up our own portals in our own ways, and we don't. So there are people that play the game without setting up portals because they like the travel and immersion of that, and that's fine. And I think that's what the game allows it. That soft progression that ultimately guides you. And I think if we'd played the game and got all the way to the end, I think we probably would have all put in probably about maybe 100 hours at least. If and I think that's sort of kudos to the game that it's that beta phase in 100 hours, and that's because of the soft progression rather than just no progression where people would have just been like, oh, there's nothing really, no point, we can just chop trees and build huts.
Yeah. How did you find it? Because I couldn't get my head around the building mechanics. I didn't have the patience or the fidelity with the hammer to get things where I wanted it, and I pretty much left that all to you and just did like donkey work, cutting down trees and all that good stuff. How did you find the building part? Because you built our homestead from the ground up. You built Salt Rock, which is our initial home, on like a little rock that will get battered by the waves as another cool thing about the game is that the weather changes and the waves, get choppier and come further in. Everything in the game that's like you chop down a tree and the log has its own physics and it rolls down hills. It will hit things. It can kill someone. I've seen YouTube videos and clips where someone cuts down a tree and it falls on their mate and squashes them. It can kill enemies. Like, it's got a very good like fundamentals under the hood where everything kind of interacts with each other in the world. But on the building side specifically, how did you find doing that? Because as I said, I didn't get on with it, and I don't have a creative bone in my body anyway, so I always do struggle. It's not. It felt like it was nowhere near as intuitive for me anyway than say what Minecraft is. But then again, it wasn't working off just square blocks.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing. Like, you either go down the route that Minecraft, you can have a floating block and build around it, and the what's underneath it doesn't matter to a certain extent, and so there's the physics just isn't there for it. Whereas this, what I learned, and even looking back at the base, like the physics for that,
There's still a bit of wood in the ceiling that's on a beam.
Probably
that you left up there.
It's just because I couldn't get to it, and I felt like if I tried to get to it, I would be in a world of I'll break something. And I do now look at that, and I learn. I feel like I would go back now and do my next build even better. And I think it's one of those ones that the more you build, the better you become because you understand it. And I definitely think it's like a bit of that learning curve. Once you're over that top of that hit curve, you suddenly things start to make a bit more sense. Why you need struts in grounds to hold up, certain floors, and certain roofs to cover flooring so they don't degrade quicker, and all that type of stuff.
It's more advanced than what people probably think,
the
isn't it?
smoke mechanisms. I thought was a really good little feature that if you didn't build like a proper chimney around your fire pit where you got a place for the smoke to come, it would smoke out your house, and you would then start suffocating, and that would punish you. And the little things like that, which I would have never thought when I first come, because games don't usually teach me that. I suddenly had to figure that out by going, what the hell's going on, trying to build a chimney that didn't work the first time, realizing it needed bigger gaps, that and all that type of thing. And so it's definitely, I wouldn't say I was brilliant at the building, but I think I got to grips with it, and I did enjoy it. There's definitely certain things that could be a little bit more intuitive in terms of the way they click together, because sometimes you have to get the tiniest right pixel for it to click, and that is annoying. I wish the hitbox or the click boxes were slightly better to click things in, but ultimately, usually you'd figure a workaround around it to click it in, but it was just that wasn't as intuitive as maybe some of the other stuff. But it allowed you to build some nice stuff. It was really interesting that the game probably wouldn't allow us to build a 4-story house just out of wood, because the physics would say, well, the wood isn't strong enough to be able to go that high and support that much unless you put the proper beams into place. And actually you could have high, you went up, you unlocked stone, or then you could unlock iron cladded beams and stuff like that, and that would allow you to build higher and bigger and stuff like that. And so we talk about progression. That's like one of those soft levels to progression. If you progress through and go through the bosses, you can get better equipment. And so if you're into the building side of things, you're like, well, I want to get through it because I want to be able to make this fancy structure. And I definitely enjoyed the building. I am not a builder, and I can't spend hundreds of hours building something. I can maybe spend a couple of streams, like maybe 3 to 6 hours doing something, and then I'm like, well, that'll do. And that's why you saw some things just left on that beams just woods up there, because I'm like, oh, I've done it now. I've finished. I've gone. I'm not bothering with it anymore now. I'm not going to pull it down, make it better. Whereas some people really get the bit in between the teeth about building, like have to build this really. Like Phil's buildings were fantastic, and he would really. I think he made one comment once when we were just building a fence around. He's like, "So I don't know how you guys are doing that. Like, I spend all like an hour literally planning out what I needed to do, where
Yeah.
things need to go, and we're just going around there plomping fences down, and he just couldn't believe it. And I think that just is a testament to different people that play the game slightly different, and this game can cope with that as well. And so I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it's the best building features in the world. I wouldn't say it's the worst. I just think it was a nice thing to have in the game, and it allowed you to build structures that felt very Viking-like.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue. Do you feel like the Viking theme or the Viking? Well, yeah, the Viking theme. You are you're allegedly a dead warrior that's going to the afterlife and all that stuff, and you can customize your character to have long hair, look like a Viking, good beard. Did that matter at the end of the day for games like this, or could it have been a flavour of something else with the same mechanics? Just like, could it have been something generic? I don't know enough about Rust, but could it just have been like, you're not a Viking, you're just a survivor that's landed on a weird planet? Or does the Viking theme kind of give it an extra boost?
In my mind, it does, because you look at these games, and if you're saying as say Rust, or if it's just normal people running around now, you would expect to be able to get to a certain level of technology and therefore unlock things like guns and stuff like that.
Yep.
By being a Viking, you're never going to unlock guns and all that type of stuff. So you're always thinking about melee weapons, swords, bows and arrows and stuff like that. And
Right. Yes.
I think it sort of puts it into a nice box where, maybe for the development team, where adding those extra physics in, though they'd be cool and stuff like that to have guns, it's like, does everything need to have guns and so forth? And it was nice that I think it put in that box. It also, I think, the Viking theme added to that level of story, like that Norse mythology, and that sort of worked nicely into the bosses and the raven and the big tree in the sky, which no one knows what's about. Maybe they do, but we didn't know.
No.
But like I think it adds. It's like any game. You could probably reskin it. You could probably reskin it as a pirate game, or you could probably reskin it as a Bronze Age game, or you could reskin it as a medieval game. But I think, for what it was worth, the story it told it enabled it to tell a story in a certain way, which I think was the appealing thing for it. So yeah, I think like any game, you could reskin it. But I think the Viking era worked. I think there probably would have been a couple of other eras that could have worked. As I said, maybe that Bronze Age sort of period in places like Europe. Maybe that. The thing is, that's the other thing. Like, you probably couldn't even put it in like that Roman era, because suddenly you're expecting maybe these massive Roman buildings that are made out of stone and stuff, and being able to. In your head, I'd be able to think, well, I surely I'd be able to create a Colosseum at some point. But the Vikings never were massively. Well, they created big buildings out of wood and stuff like that, but they and made in stone, but nothing that I can think of off the top of my head which was like massive. And so it sort of puts you in that box, and yeah, I think it worked well. So I think it was a good theme. I could have been skinned as others, yeah, but would I want it to be? No.
Yeah. Interesting. Was there anything better than building our first raft and just going off to the sea and just rocking up at a random island that we had no idea was? And like the adventuring part of this game, especially in like the early stages where you just set off on random to find a new biome because you're aware that there's going to be new materials there. I found that to be some of the fun time, definitely the best times we had when we weren't specifically grinding for a particular item or a particular set of resources, when it was just like, right, let's just drive the boat somewhere and see what we bump into. And hey, maybe we'll bump into an area where everything's going to kill us, which did happen several times. But sometimes you'd stumble across just new areas and new enemies, and it had that element where you can do that in many other games, but it doesn't quite have that same feel as you're actually going on an adventure. And then you all get whatever you collect, you all dump back in the boat and go back to Homestead, split it all out, all that good stuff. How did you find that part of it? Because I think that's a key to why some people enjoy it. They get their party together and just head out and see what they run into.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Like that adventuring side of things, especially when you're adventuring in those early stages and you're finding new stuff. and that's a bit like whoa. And as you mentioned, we got this was before Dave's server when we all got on the raft and we were just messing around trying to get to the other, and we couldn't figure out how to sail it. And
Oh, you had to do the wind, didn't you, to make sure the wind's
yeah, exactly.
blowing? Yeah.
And it was good fun, and that's sort of was that social element that we could just mess around and stuff like that, and then doing some sailing around, coming across other biomes later on when we were a bit more skilled was really good. And as I said, that when I died that time and I couldn't bother that, I found that dead village or whatever it was.
Yeah.
No one had seen before, even Phil, who was like 200 hours into the game, and so that was like.
And then we found the merchant off the back of that.
We found the merchant, and I think that was the other thing. Like Phil had been looking for the merchant all the time, and we just stumbled across it, and we just got lucky. But that was a really good moment when we found that, and I think I would say with the game that was some of the enjoyable bit. I would say I would like it to be less repetitive in certain biomes and the way it repeats. So once you've come across a dead village, we saw probably another maybe 2 of them or something like that, and it was just like, well, we just won't go near that because we know what that is, and there's not much. You won't get much good from it. Whereas the first time we went into it was like, oh, maybe there's some really good loot here in some of the chests. And so but I think that's what drove us in, and it was similar when we saw some of the other stuff. It was like, oh, well, maybe there's something new here that we haven't experienced. Maybe be some good loot.
There was a ship that we dig out the chest for. You do that a few times, and then you soon realise that once you're past a certain point, that's the stuff in there is just of no use at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And so that ship was a really good. The first time we did it, I was like, oh, that was really cool. But then you notice when you're walking around the world, you see another 5, 6 of them. And you're like, oh, it feels less cool now. It feels less impactful because there's a lot of them. And I get maybe why they do it because, well, I get to a certain extent because if you're playing on the big server and there's lots of people playing, you want to give as many people the opportunity to have that experience and, not one person to, be ripping everything up.
No.
It'd be nice to maybe in the settings be able to set how much things spawn. Would you only get one of everything, or could you get several or whatever it is? And so I do agree that the adventuring, exploring at the start was fab. I think towards the end I think what we made sure was we saw all the biomes. I think there was probably we could have experienced a bit more in the plains biome, but we didn't get too far into that.
Yeah, no, we done 3 of the 5 bosses in the end. We've spoken quite positively about the game. Is there any other positive elements of Valheim that you wanted to touch upon that we haven't gone over? Because there is a lot to this game. Like on the surface, it's just it could be just considered another survival building, crafting, resource gathering game with a Viking spin, but as we've alluded to, it's got a lot more under the hood. But any other things that stick out in your mind as a sort of a net positive for Valheim? Because it's on I think it's passed over 6 million sales, which is insane for a development team that's I think is under 10. There's less than 10 of them doing this, so they're all laughing. Whatever happens after this, they're all laughing. But any other bits that you particularly enjoyed that we haven't touched upon?
Yeah, I think the fundamental when we beat a boss, it felt deserved. It never felt like it wasn't earned. And I'd seen other YouTube videos of people doing it, and maybe they were underprepared and it took them longer. I think Dave mentioned it took him like nearly 40 minutes to do the second boss or something like that.
Yeah.
And when we rocked in, it took us like 5 or 10 minutes or something like that.
We put the work in.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what I'm saying. It sort of felt like when we did a boss and it wasn't maybe as painful as maybe what other people experienced, it felt rewarding because we'd put the effort in beforehand to get the resources we wanted to get to a certain level or gear, and we was like, well, let's not tackle it till we got at least got this and that, and because we put the work in before, it sort of felt like it was deserved. And the bosses weren't easy. Like that third boss wasn't the hardest thing in the world, like in terms of gaming, but if it took 4 of us being relatively tactful and
had
moving
to
around.
had to be prepared. You died once.
Beds down and stuff like that.
We had to have the right potions, the resistance potions. Without that, we'd have really struggled.
Yeah, and because we put the effort in, and it's the same like the game. seems to reward for you putting the effort in, and it's maybe not so therefore as painful. If you don't put the effort in, you're probably going to feel the pain quite heavily, and I think that was quite good. I also, as I said, the thing I briefly touched on was, I'd put on maybe twice the amount of hours you, but you could still progress along. I think that's a really key point, because it enables, just because you haven't been putting the time to progressing in, I can, do certain elements that, and give you certain gear if you wanted. So like, I think like once I just went on and just did a load of smelting and creating iron ingots, for 3 hours, which, just because I had the time. But one of us had to do it, not both had to be logged in to do that, and we both sort of reap the rewards from that. And actually, we both put in effort to collect it, but we didn't both need to sort of sit through. And I think that was a nice element to it. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed the bosses. I would have, looking back, like to have done bosses 4 and 5, but I just get the feeling we were sort of coming to the end, and I was quite happy to take a seat back at that point.
Yeah. So, what? Any negatives really? Anything that you feel maybe not negatives, because it's still early access. They could improve this stuff, but what sort of stuff would you like to see improved? And maybe you want to start with perhaps why we did decide, or why you felt like it was time to stop as well. That might have led into it, because we definitely. From my perspective, the grind to get the gear and get competent to battle that third boss just felt much longer than the other 2 bosses previous. And I don't know if that was because we over prepared, which could happen, like that easily could have happened, or whether it is the fact that the only way to get the iron was to go in those shitty little crypts that I despise. I never want to go into a crypt again. I don't make a habit of it normally, just for those wondering, but. That didn't thrill me too much. But from your perspective, what do you think ultimately led to its demise? And it's probably going to be a temporary demise. I think if there's a big update, potentially we're looking at perhaps going back in later on down the line. But why after 60 hours and with 2 bosses still to go did it get a pin put in it? Other than Dave threatening to shut the server down, but he did say he'll keep it open if we want to.
But for me, personally, is always I would have never played it on my own, especially put that amount of time into it. There's games out there that I love playing, but I don't get as much enjoyment out of them playing on my own. Sea of Thieves is another one that I absolutely love it when there's not just me online and there's other people. I've played it online on my own, and it's not as fun. It's more fun being in those adventures with others. And so I think ultimately, for me, I probably could have carried on. I wasn't really that burnt out. I felt like others were getting a bit burnt out with it, and so for me, it wasn't. I'm not there to punish someone, say keep playing because I want to play, and actually like. I wouldn't get as much enjoyment out of that, and so for me it was all that sort of social element of it, and I think that's the point. We may as well move on to another game that re-sparks and maybe gets the juices going a bit, and then maybe, as you said, we'll come back. And that's happened plenty of times when if you look back at our gaming habits, that as a crew, as the Dimp crew, we've stepped away from something and come back to it at a later date because there's been, as you said, a major update, and we all want to jump in, and we did enjoy that first time around. I think for this one, I was becoming a little bit burnt out. Like, I don't usually, as you said, put that amount of time into a game for such a little amount of time. But I think it was just things were starting to become a little bit repetitive, and it was just, as I think I alluded to it earlier, like, once you dug up a ship once and you saw another 4 or 5, you thought, oh, I've sort of done that, I've experienced that. And it's the same with the crypt. Once we'd done a crypt, and we need to do another like 7, like to get everyone geared up, that was a problem. And maybe actually looking back, it would have been better to tackle crypts on their own or something like that, because actually we would probably only needed to tackle 2 crypts each, and we'd probably all been up, because we was going around sort of helping each other and was tackling several. You end up doing the same thing over and over and over again, and so that sort of, I think, got to the point, because I think when we came to fighting the bosses, we all loved that element.
Yeah.
And there was nothing, because they were new, they were exciting, and we enjoyed it. And I think looking at it, we was about to go into the snow biome and stuff like that, drinking the potions. I would definitely saw frustration come in. Like, we were getting a little bit frustrated if we'd got to a point, up in those mountains, and we were consistently dying because we didn't have enough potions, or wolf attacked us. It would have probably, it would have probably been so frustrating. We'd have all walked away from it. So I think it's probably a good time to walk away to recharge his batteries a little bit, and then sort of go back into it a bit later when things have updated. I do hope if we do jump back into it, we don't lose everything and have to start from the beginning again and have to do the same 3 bosses, because I think that would put me off from going back in, because I feel like I've done it now. I feel like I've checked that box. I don't really want to check that box again unless there's something dramatic there that, different.
Yeah.
I think it would also be nice, some of the ways that you get the ores, it'd be nice just to get it, have maybe variations around getting it. So, if you could go over to a different biome and dig to get, the iron, or because one of the things we never did, but once you defeat the third boss and you've got, that finder thing for the silver, that also works on iron in the swamp. So you can then dig down and get a massive iron veins, but it sort of becomes a little bit redundant at that point unless you're doing loads of building, because you feel like, well, I've leveled up and now actually the next set of equipment's all going to be the next stuff. So you sort of just forget about it and move on a little bit, unless you really need to go back for something to update on, the workbench or something along those lines. So it's yeah, I think that element of repetitiveness isn't so good, especially when we're so used to being spoon fed, games that just give us stuff, then give us something new, and then we're going to the next part of the story.
Loot box, me.
I think the repetitiveness, it's definitely takes a different type of gamer. But I think we left it, I think, at the right time, because I think a bit more. And I think people would have been far too burnt out. They wouldn't want to go back for a long time. I think we walked away, and now if there's a good update, we potentially would go back sooner than probably what we would back then. I guess the one of those typical examples is like No Man's Sky. Not that we were burnt out, but we were so disappointed in it when it first came out. I know you pushed yourself through it to get to the end, but we're so disappointed in it. It actually took so many updates for us to actually go back and for that first time to really try again. And I feel like, though they're putting out these amazing updates, and we always share the updates when they come out.
Yeah.
Like, we don't jump back in until it's been so far along, and they'll say, "Wow, that's a big enough load of stuff there now that we definitely want to go back." And No Man's Sky sort of getting to that point now where, in my head, there's been so much different that's gone since we last gone into it. I wouldn't mind going back again and sort of starting from afresh and seeing how we get on. But it's I think. With Valheim, we sort of stepped away at that right time. As long as we don't lose our progression. If we lose our progression, we won't go back for a long time, because we won't want to do that 60 hours again.
That's all in Dave's hands. Apparently, he saved the server data so it can be resurrected at any point. So that's what should happen. But I guess we'll see. Well, I've got nothing else to say on Valheim. I mean, we didn't actually get to talk about the combat too much, but I remember you enjoying the combat. It's quite simplistic. Has parry, blocking, all that good stuff, and the different type of weapons. Like, all the melee weapons kind of felt samey-ish. I always like a bow myself if I can stay away from the damage. But ultimately, there's far more elements to Valheim than there is just in the combat. I would just say it's competent at the least. It's not going to blow you away, and you don't have to. It's not like a MMO taskbar where you have to keep like recharging your abilities or anything. It's all, it does have a taskbar, but you're switching between weapons potentially. But I think it was at least competent. Anything else on Valheim before we leave it in the dust?
I'm not much of a combat, so I'm probably not the best person to gauge that. I enjoyed what I did. But yeah, I'm definitely not.
As long as it's functional,
it did the job. The only thing I'd probably comment on, maybe one of the other slightly annoying things, though, some people might enjoy this feature. It's just the base attacks. Like, they became a bit frustrating because you build some stuff up and then the trolls turn up. That was a bit like you spent time and effort, and it goes back to that sort of you losing your loot to someone else in like an hour after gauging it. You spent 2 hours building something, and then for a troll to come along and sort of smash it up was really annoying. Like, equally so, sometimes as I mentioned, I logged on to smelt some iron, and it took me 3 hours. But I had 3 base attacks in that 3 hours, like literally like once an hour, and it was that probably made the smelting that iron an hour longer than it needed to be. And all I wanted to do was do that. I didn't want to go on and combat that, and so I don't mind maybe attacks in the wild and stuff like that, but maybe leave the base to maybe not be hit so hard, or at least let it be very very infrequent. So it might happen once every sort of 20 hours you're playing or something.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't like Conan, where they would literally say, if you're not ready for this attack, it's going to ruin your base. They remember there was like a countdown, pretty much, and at least you was aware of it. But I think that was a much tougher, a much tougher prospect. I mean, our base didn't get destroyed, luckily, during any of these attacks. But when you just try to do something and those fucks are fucking those trolls turn up, and you're like, oh, for goodness sake, because they can do some real damage if you let them get close. That was a hindrance, so maybe a little bit of balance in there.
Yeah, a bit like 7 Days to Die as well. I think they have like the blood moon every 7 days, so you have to be. No,
that's the game, though, isn't it? That's part of the. That's like it's built into the cycle of that. Like you prepare for each attack. Whereas,
I was going to say 7 Days to Die isn't really about building, and there are people that probably like building brilliant bases. That is more about it, but I guess I was alluded to in the same context that you're at an area, whereas that obviously is probably more aimed at that's the game. Whereas the base being attacked in Valheim didn't feel like
it was
the game.
No,
it was a hindrance rather than let me enjoy it, or at least have the ability once again in those settings to toggle some of that on or off, or the frequency of it, because sometimes it felt just a bit too frequent when you want to do something. As I said, I wouldn't have minded if once in that 3 hours a troll had turned up and I had to sort it out, but have 2 different troll attacks and an undead attack or whatever it was in that 3 hour time was just a zap of my time. And my time when I play games now is quite precious, and that did annoy me.
I didn't like the fact that the mobs that were attacking you were usually just the last mob that you'd run into previously. Like you discover a new biome, and then suddenly you'd see swamp monsters and whatever was in there. And then suddenly, like millions of miles away from a swamp, you would be attacked by swamp creatures. It broke my immersion. Like, where do these swamp fucks come from?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It should be where your base is based. That should be the prominent
so
attack.
like trolls and stuff like that. I did like your idea that you came up with. That was it. I think it was your idea where you said you put up the head of the something you've killed, and they won't then attack your base.
Yes,
because that gives you reason to be like, all right, they're attacking, but if I can get ahead, and maybe make the head drops even more rare at that point.
Yes,
you're like,
yes.
Maybe do it cool. 1 in every 100 or every 50 trolls you kill. That means you're going to have to go out and find trolls, go to Tribe Codes, because you want that to stop attacking your base. Maybe not being maybe at the same level of brutality as now, where it probably won't destroy your base that much, but it gives you reason to go out and get that head of that mob and stuff like that. And then I know you say not about these swamp fucks turning up, but
how they got there? They get a boat and rock up.
Maybe they've got that figured out. Maybe they figured out how to use portals after seeing ours. But I don't mind them turning up afterwards. But then at least give me a way to get rid of them. So like at least give me a reason to go out and kill a load of those swamp fucks to be able to say now stay away from my base.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been a nice little feature. But because there is no way to get rid of it. I think Phil moaned that once he wanted to create a portal base, he had to do it on an island in the middle of the sea, so it never got attacked by mobs. And
he did it.
It was an interesting observation. So I feel like there could be something there to do that. And like the people that like building, if you have like 20 buildings around the world, then you're gonna have to get the 20 troll heads to stop them attacking those ones. So I think it gives reason.
Yeah, I agree. So that's Valheim. Deep dive, almost 100 hours between us. Phil's probably done treble that on his own, so he's the real expert on it. But what's I've noticed in the last, I don't know, I actually don't know a timeline, because the first time we started doing all this podcast malarkey, I think you was on like the 4th or 5th episode, and at that point I had sold my PS4 to you, because I was getting a white one, I think, and I think with it I bundled The Last of Us Remastered, so Sony exclusive, PlayStation only title. You played through it, you gave your thoughts, you enjoyed it, and that was good. And over time, like, you slowly seem to phase out of the console gaming space. The Switch came along, that disappeared. The Switch then got rebought in a light form, so it's a handheld only for good. And during that time also, you upgraded or got a new PC to start obviously using it for other things, but also it's capable of playing games on it as well. I mean, it's over a number of years, but to me there's a clear transition from console in front of the telly type gaming, which we used to play Sunday morning sessions. That's where that came from, PS4, into almost a PC exclusive space with a flavour of handheld Switch. What's going on? You alluded at the start of the episode that you're a bit of a hipster of the games that are coming out. Is it simply that? Is it simply that the type of games that are on the consoles just don't interest you as much, or is there another reason around convenience, or just that having it on a different screen and not the telly can help in household situations when there are partners that don't want to watch people play video games? I don't know what's wrong with these people, but they don't want to watch us play video games.
Yeah, I think you allude to it a little bit at the end there. Well, at least how, I guess, the transition started. I think anyone that knows me well or has heard me rattle on any podcast or anything knows that the game of choice that I always go back to is Guild Wars 2. And
Yes.
that's obviously PC only.
I discovered that.
You did. I know at the time, actually an interesting point, and then we'll go back to that, but at the time I was on a Mac, and so I didn't have a PC. I had a standard Mac.
I forgot you had the Mac.
The Mac, and I was playing Guild Wars on the Mac because it was Apple compatible, whereas there weren't a lot of games out there that weren't compatible.
No.
And actually, I think though you and Krog discovered it, it was me and Hall
Yeah.
that kick-started it, whereas
Yeah.
me and Hall had both been made redundant at the time, and we had a period of time where we both were off work and we both were going to go to new jobs, and we were like, what else should we do? And we just sat on an MMO for I don't know, like 15 hours a day, what it seemed like at the time when our partners were at work. And so that sort of kick-started that side of things, and because it was on the console, there was no need to go over to the console. I was also living in central London at that moment in time, and anyone that knows realty prices knows that you're not going to get a lot of space for central London, and therefore I was living in a one-bed flat with the missus, and we had one TV to share, one living room, very open-planned living room, kitchen type thing, and so there was no escape for me to be able to just turn on the PlayStation and play it. So the Guild Wars allowed me to go and play that while she was also, watching TV in the evening and stuff like that.
I could always hear Netflix on in the background.
You could always hear. She'd always
Awful
be watching
programs.
Still the worst, still the worst. She's still watching absolute trash. Though it's made me start watching trash now. I think we watch RuPaul. So we're all
I refuse to watch that. But
I know
it's on.
I could be the next drag queen. But it's good trash TV. But yeah. So I think that was sort of like the start, and then I got the PC because I was like, I've sunk hundreds and hundreds of hours into Guild Wars, and maybe even coming up to like nearly 1,000 odd hours. And obviously the Mac just couldn't cope with it. It was starting to slow down. It was getting quite old at that point in time, and
It's a fucking Mac.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to get a PC. I listened to Dave and said, does this work? I didn't want to spend a load of money at the time because I didn't have a lot of money at the time, though I'm not got a lot of money now, but at the time I was more poor. So I think I managed to get a rig for like in terms of not the screen and that, but everything included for like maybe just shy of £900, which is just still quite a big investment, still twice as expensive as a console. Really just to play Guild Wars. And that's primarily what happened. And then I think we did our Sunday morning sessions, which I really enjoyed. It was that sort of social element because I'd moved away from where we'd grown up. Maybe I didn't see people as much, so gaming became more of a social thing for me.
No one sees Logan, and he still lives around here, so it must be the same for him. Yeah, he lives around the corner technically.
Exactly, he's never even come to the pub when I used to leave for that.
No, he didn't.
One time he came and people rubbed a packet of crisps in his face and he never came back.
That did happen. It's a true story.
It's in the Dimp law books and it's true.
It's true.
And I forgot where I was going with this now. But yeah, so I think that was sort of the start, and then we was playing PlayStation. But the thing was, the games that we were playing less, and actually the barrier to play something maybe once or twice or a handful of times was pretty expensive. You're talking about 40, £50 to play a game most of the time between us, unless something came out free on
PS
the
Plus.
PlayStation
But
Plus.
you still have to pay for that every year.
Exactly, and so that sort of died off because we mentioned Conan. We only played it, I think, because it was a freebie on the PlayStation Plus. We wouldn't have played it otherwise. And I think the only time we did play for a game was maybe Diablo 3, where we got through all that, and then maybe there was a couple of other things. But we would meet on those Sunday mornings. But that sort of died down because. Actually, I think a lot of it was my fault because I signed up to run a marathon, so I think I killed off Sunday morning sessions ultimately by doing that and starting running. I know, but I had to train. And so ultimately, I started playing more on a PC, and then I think last year or maybe even the year before that, probably longer, the PlayStation 5 was coming out, and I was like, "There's nothing coming out on the PlayStation 4 that I really want to play. That's scheduled." And so I may as, and to be fair, I become really bad as in I even got Red Dead and I played for 20 hours and I put it down, and when you put a game down long enough you never want to go back to it. That's what happened with Red Dead 2, and I still need to go back to it today. I'm waiting for it to go on sale on the PC, I think, but it's always 50 bloody quid, maybe 30 at the cheapest, so I'm waiting for that one day to be a tenner or something, and I'll buy that. But yeah, so I just was looking. There was just nothing coming out, so I got rid of the PlayStation and went, all right, I'll get a PlayStation 5 when it comes out, and not when it comes out, when something good is announced for it. And then there was just nothing good. I wasn't. I know we had The Last of Us 2, which people could have said you could have gone into that, but even that was PlayStation 4.
PS4,
I was I was quite happy just to give that a miss and wait for maybe going on to PlayStation 5 and playing it there. But I think ultimately now I wouldn't buy a PlayStation 5 or even an Xbox unless something said you had to buy it, like GTA, or something along there, like GTA 6 or Red Dead 3, or maybe even not Red Dead 3, because it depends on where their PC schedule. They've always been notoriously bad on their PC schedule.
Always like a year later. I mean, could you wait a year, I guess, for GTA 6?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I probably couldn't. I'd probably buy just a PlayStation just to play GTA 6. But once again, the story would be brilliant, but it's also about that online element and playing with friends and stuff like that. And if everyone's getting it for the PlayStation 5, then I would sort of I'd pull myself into the PlayStation 5 for that reason, that social element.
I don't know. I think now there's enough PC Dimp members that there's enough on there now. Really.
I think, and that's where I was going to go with this. And we obviously mentioned about Switches. I liked the Switch when I first got it. Played quite a few games, completed a few stuff. And then I was just like, I don't really need it. And actually, I think I sold it to get my PC rig.
Yeah.
So I got a couple of £100 back for it and all the games or whatever. And I put that towards my PC rig because I was like, well, I want to play that more than I want to play the Switch games. I want to play Guild Wars. Yeah. And so I did that. And then obviously lockdown happened and I got the Animal Crossing came out, and that's all made me buy the Switch. Not played any other games apart from Animal Crossing. I played Pokemon, but I never finished that. I got quite near the end, and that's another story. But yeah, never played any other games on it, and that's still just sitting over in the corner over there. And that was purely a lockdown pulse. What's the word?
Impulse.
Buy. But yeah, then I think as you alluded, people have started buying rigs or better PCs to play games, and I think you had one, but I think and even so you've recently just upgraded and you started playing more online on PC. Like Hall, I think, was a big instigator, but when he's come on to Destiny, and now he's doing a lot of streaming on the Dimp channel, was a big sort of move over. And actually and obviously Dave's always been here, but that unlocked the ability to play those Destiny games with Dave and stuff like that. And there's a good 4 of us now that are on PC, and we had Chappers as well for a while. And then look, we
had Phil on Valheim.
Phil on Valheim. That's the thing. We've met other people we probably wouldn't have met as well by being on the PC itself. And I'm pretty sure Krog's not a million miles away from getting a PC when he fucking pulls his finger out. But once again, once Krog's gone, it's like, why is there a need for me to go back unless there's a game that's just saying everyone's getting on that because it's not going to come out on the PC for a year, and it's only going to be GTA that does that. That's the only game I can think that's going to do that. There's no, unless there's a PlayStation exclusive that comes out that it's really only them. I can't see anyone doing it. And I think what I mentioned at the very start was the barrier to playing with mates was like 40, 50 quid every time. With the Barrow playing with mates here is a tenner, you know, and you don't mind spending a tenner. And if you don't like it and you play it for 4 or 5 hours or do a couple of sessions and you bin it off, it's not the end of the world. It is when you spent 50, 60 quid on a game. And so that allows us to buy things like, you know, we did the Hogwarts, the Fall Guys, you know, the Valheims.
And even that though, if you play it for less than 2 hours, you can refund it on Steam. So like, if for whatever reason, like within under 2 hours, you don't want it anymore, you can refund it, and there's definitely no harm, no foul. But,
Exactly.
But I was speaking the other week about Resident Evil Village. I played through that, got it on PC because I've got the new rig and whatnot. Bought it for 33 quid, and you know elsewhere on any of the consoles it was retailing for $54.99. You could get it about 50-ish, maybe 45 at the lowest. Like, the games are just so much cheaper. It's the same game, just that you're playing it on a, albeit usually a much more expensive bit of hardware, but like in the long term you will save money going down the PC route. And you'll get access to things like Valheim.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what you don't get on the consoles that much. I know they've always tried to go that way and say we'll allow these independents onto our platform, but it does allow something just to pop out and go and take that people weren't expecting to take things by storm. Like you obviously mentioned Animal Crossing, but earlier this year you had Among Us. That wasn't a console game. That was
still not on PlayStation 5.
Exactly, and it was
it's on mobile.
It's these games that, you know, a team of less than 10 can put together, and, you know, suddenly just, you know, it pops up and you're like, oh, well, you know, we can all jump onto that and it's a lot cheaper. And the PC, you're right, offers you a cheaper way into gaming. And if you want to potentially try multiple games, like you got your CD keys, your GA2s or whatever it's called and stuff like that. And not all of them are the best, but like it does allow you to play those games. I think the other day I picked up, or not the other day, a while ago, a few of us got into NBA 2K21. I think I played it for 4 or 5 hours. Wasn't my cup of tea, but it's not the end of the world because I only paid £14.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'd had to buy that on the PlayStation or on the Xbox, I'd have been paying 40 quid, 30 to 40 quid for it. So, and I would have been a lot more annoyed that I'd paid that and I'd only put like 4 or 5 hours into it. So, yeah, it's definitely that way. And I've for the foreseeable future at the moment, I definitely feel like that's the way I'm going. Even now with the Xbox Game Pass, like and the connectivity between the PC and that, like even if GTA did come out on the Xbox, you would hope there would be maybe some crossplay between the PC and the Xbox, so that, you know, you can play together with your mates and stuff like that. And so, and actually, I think we did that on Sea of Thieves with
Yeah, we did.
And so it does allow more control, and I'm not someone that's going to put a PC together. I don't really understand it. I definitely need to upgrade mine, and I don't know how to pull any of the little jiggly parts out and replace it with any of the other little jiggly parts. I'd probably just end up buying a ready-made rig and just spend the money on it.
Because the thing is, in today's climate, is that's pretty much the only way to get anything that's not last generation, or like if you want anything relatively new, the pre-built is the only way, because you just can't buy the components at the moment. The GPUs, good luck, you will not find them. That's the only way to get them, and I'm the same as you. I would say never. I would like to put my own PC together one day, but not when I'm dangling with like top level gear. It'd have to be like as a side project. I'll just build my own one, and I won't actually use it. Perhaps maybe I'll just build it and put it in a spare room, but
put it behind the TV in the living room in case you want to do something in there.
Yeah, there is always that. So, yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely been a bit of a shift in the Dimp ranks towards the PC space, and like obviously we stream a hell of a lot more than we ever did, so the PC is like light years ahead of the consoles. Like I even ran several tests on the PS5 to see whether that was viable, and it just wasn't. Like the encoding, all that stuff. Now I've got a capture card that I could plug in and then put on but it's a lot of faff. The fact that you can just load up a game, load up OBS, change the title, hit stream, boot the game up, and you're off. Like that's a massive boon for like us anyway, if we're ever going to be streaming semi-regularly. It's like it's a lot more versatility for the PC for sure. And
This podcast is there's a reason for that. It would have stayed just on. We always used to happen via Skype calls, and now because we're all on PCs and there's more of us on it, flying into Discord, as you mentioned, only takes someone to have a little bit of a project to do something, I think like Hall went off and set up some Streamlabs or whatever it is, or Stream Elements, and other people dived in to help a little bit, and it enables us to now stream these podcasts live, um which is nice, which is something we would have never done if we hadn't have all sort of moved to that PC place.
no, yeah, there would be no video version of this podcast, and people wouldn't be able to see me sitting here with my sunglasses now over my eyes, because I thought it was actually acceptable to wear sunglasses over on your head indoors, but I've just been informed that that's not, so I've pushed them over my head, so I'm like a Gallagher brother, just wearing them indoors.
It reminds me of that one time that and if anyone can find it, I've got an old YouTube channel where I used to do some vlogs. There's only about 6 things on there, but I think in the very first one I did like an introduction indoors, and from my computer, and I was wearing a scarf, and I got so much shit ripped out of me for wearing a scarf indoors. They're like, why the fuck are you doing that? And then I was like, well, suffering for the fashion, isn't it?
I
That doesn't roll
will. I will
in
defend. I will defend the sunglasses indoors, simply because I've several times woken up on a Saturday, Sunday, or even a weekday with a very bad hangover, and if you've got to sit at a screen all day and work, do you know what helps? Putting a set of sunglasses on. It just takes the edge of things, I find. And I was out walking before I came on this, so I had them on the top of my head, and that was that.
I might try that tomorrow when I've not got a meeting. Put the sunners on. See if that helps. Because I've definitely been getting a few headaches by being in front of this. It's work from home. It's sat in front of this computer and doing all these meetings from home. But yeah, maybe there's tip of the day. Tip of the day. This could be a new segment. For
Tips for the well-rounded gamer.
Sunglasses while working.
It is an alcoholic life hack, as Shelley has just told me. I have to ask one question, because you were talking about hipster games earlier, and that you like to look for something different, and blah 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 blah. One of the PlayStation exclusives that launched in 2019 was Death Stranding. It appeared on PC later on. You went out and got it at a later date, played a bit of it, and then binned it. Now, if you want a unique game, that's one to go for, but what happened there?
I think binned it's probably the wrong term. It's what happened when I similar to Red Dead. I really really enjoyed it. The moment within the first few hours, and I had to go off and do that first mission. I started walking through the hills, and the music started playing. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is so immersive. Like, this is exactly what I want. I want that, music to kick in and just relax me. And I was so in awe of that. And I was dead on set playing it. When I step away from a game, and I don't go, and maybe it's a couple of weeks, and I'm like, well, I better go back into it, or as I won't. And then I start getting into my own head saying, oh, you've left it too long now, James. You're gonna have to go. You've probably forgotten what you
have to restart it.
Yeah, and I fucking hate restarting anything. I don't even watch a movie twice. The only movie I watch twice is A Muppet's Christmas Carol. And that's the only film I'll ever watch more than once. Everything else can go and do one after I've seen it once, because I've seen it. Why do I need to see it again? And it's the same with games. It's like, why would I go back and do the same thing again if I've already done it once? I've ticked that part in my brain. I've got that logged. I don't need it logged for a second time. So yeah, that's sort of what happened. I sort of talked myself out of it because I left it too long, and I don't know why. I think I picked up at the start of lockdown because I was like, this is going to be my lockdown game because we're all going to be stuck indoors. And then I discovered I could just go for long walks, and then maybe that took up the time because Alex wanted to spend a bit of time with me, and so I just
Well, to be honest, some people have said that Death Stranding is like you are simulating walking and carrying stuff. That's a lot of what you're doing is walking from A to B. Amazon delivery driver, and people get paid for that, so maybe if that interests people, they can do it. But I don't know, that was always that. I was surprised you even got it, but I wasn't surprised that it didn't get finished or even played really enough. 2 more things, because the Dimp law books require it. When do we get Papers, Please, and when we're going to get the Overwatch competitive Genji stream, where you were going to play as Genji for 2 hours in competitive ranked matches, no hall, no one else to bail you out. You're in there with all the toxic fucks. So when are those two things going to happen? Make the promise now live. Well, if you were listening on the archive, but as live as you can be on this podcast.
I will definitely do papers, please. That definitely the type of game that's sort of up my street, and I could happily sort of sink a couple of hours into live on a stream without too much worry. I think we only just want me to do it so we can have the Twitch title of papers, please.
Yes, that's the only reason.
It's the only reason it ever wants to see the light of day, and I will. It's one of those things that I've been teasing the boys for so long that I think it's maybe that's that soon. The Genji stream, I will do it. I think what I would like to do, I do competitive, but maybe not on my own. I enjoy Overwatch when I'm playing with other people, and I just don't think I'd enjoy it being on my own.
You made a promise.
I can still get all the toxic stuff because that just means that someone else in the team's playing something else. But I'll just be playing Genji and that'll be the stream. So I think you're still getting what I promised. Paper plays Genji. It's just that I'll be playing with other people as well. And it was never Paper plays on his own Genji. It's Paper plays Genji and stream it so everyone can see how fucking awful I am at games, especially when you need to hit people with a hitbox, because that's when it goes terribly downhill for me in any gaming with guns. And I think the only reason you guys want to see it is because Genji is notoriously horrendously hard.
He's tough. He's a tough boy to play as.
And I can't even do fucking Soldier 76, so who's got the biggest hitbox of anyone or to get things. So
press
you can
R2
literally just
to
press
win.
R2, yeah, exactly. So I'll do it. I think I might cry a little bit if I'm doing it on my own. So the stream probably wouldn't last for 2 hours, or it'd just be 2 hours of me sobbing. But actually, that goes quite nicely into the Dimp Soul, which people would love. So
probably get an all-time record of views as well. So it's definitely worth considering. Right, I'll let you go. We'll close this down. Lots of good chat as per usual. I think the last time you came on was to talk about Ark. So it's kind of fitting that.
A long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, before obviously he was on for the Fantasy Gaming League during that period, but in terms of talking about games, I think it was Ark, and then now we have Valheim, which is taking the world by storm in 2021. So I appreciate your time, and so do all the watchers, listeners, and patrons of this particular corporation known as Dimp Digital. But we will close it down. We will shut the audio down for those listening. Not waste any more of their time, but we know that there's nothing more for us to say other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.